by way of reminder, we as a class ended up watching Miss Marris's TED Talk. That was the one about nature and definitions of nature. My 10th graders and all of our 10th graders did too. And then we read that Everglade Pythons piece by her too. And so this summer I had the opportunity to meet her when I was at the TED conference. And I sat down next to her and I was like, hey, we're doing the nature unit. Can we Skype you or hang out with you? And she was like, yeah, sure. Which was pretty awesome. So that's kind of how we have the connection today. She's probably going to end up talking kind of a little bit about like what she does, because she's kind of a unique job. I sort of want her job. She gets to travel wherever she wants to and write about it for a whole bunch of different places. It's kind of cool, right? So, and then you guys get to ask your questions too. So at the end of our unit, you guys are doing some of your own research on environmental issues. This is a perfect candidate to ask questions of, to actually like get legit primary research. So if you have any questions, write them down, hang on to them, because you're going to get a chance to ask them. All right, so this is what you'll look like. So we'll see, it looks like from blue over. So in order to kind of be on screen here, I'm going to do it so you guys can use it. So that's kind of what it looks like. Are you guys ready? We're not going to be able to see or hear you all the way in the back. If you want to move up, we've got couches up here. You can pull chairs up and around too and make it a little bit easier to see.
I can see good right
here we go. That's what happened yesterday. Like I was busy emailing a person and she shot me an email or called me. So she is out on the West Coast right now, so it's about 7:30 their time. That's dedication for us. She's very nice. She's like, my husband's going to take care of the kids. They're supposed to be getting ready for school. So she's typing from her executive assistant. Yes. Just grab the passage. All right. Hey, how are you? There we go. Hi.
Hello.
It's so nice to connect with you.
Yeah, likewise. How are you guys?
Good. Here, let me give you a better shot of sort of who we are here. So we've got kind of a mix of students in our class. And we have been watching your TED Talk and reading your piece on the Everglade Pythons. So we're really excited to connect with you this morning. Thank you so much.
Sure. So one more thing is that it turned out to be a snow day here. So little people in pajamas might show up in the background. I told them that I need to little peace and quiet protocol, but they're 4 and 6. So don't remember that.
Could you tell us a little bit about like what you do and how you got into your area?
Sure. It's kind of an interesting. Well, of course, everyone thinks their own story is interesting, I guess. But I got an English degree at the University of Texas, Austin, and then I didn't really know what to do with that, so I just went home to Seattle, where I'm from. Back then, you used to look for jobs by getting a copy of the newspaper and opening it to the Help Wanted section and then circling things. So I found a job as the secretary for the botany department at the University of Washington. And, just normal secretarial things, but I learned a lot about how science worked and what scientists do, and I got really excited about that. I had always wanted to be a writer, so I thought, I'll just combine these two interests and be a science writer. And there are science writing programs, sort of sprinkling of them across the country. So I applied to several of those, and I ended up going to the one at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. I had a little piece of paper that said I was a science writer, and I was able to get an internship at the journal Nature. And then that turned into a staff job for several years, and then I went freelance after that. So that's the sort of short version. And when I was working for Nature, I started out writing about all kinds of science, astronomy, geology, chemistry, but I found myself really gravitating towards the ecology, mostly because I got to go out, sort of hang around outside while I was reporting those stories.
Very cool. And you just got back from a trip too, right?
Well, I did a trip for National Geographic about a year ago to the Peruvian Amazon that was pretty major. And then I've done some smaller trips in the year since, but I've also been doing some reporting locally, about wolves, and that's maybe the one that I mentioned to you on email. So that one was like a 40-minute drive from my house. There's a wolf pack. That biologist who's been trying to get a handle on how many they are and where they are, and they have been messing with some livestock recently. So I've been going out with him and learning how to tell wolf prints in the snow from dog prints, and it's been a lot of fun.
Very cool. Is it okay if we ask a couple questions?
Sure, absolutely. I can see probably 2/3 of you, I think.
So I'm curious, what's it like observing a wolf pack and figuring out the numbers and stuff like that?
So, I've gone out several times now with two different wolf biologists, and I've never seen a wolf in the flesh. They do, but a lot of the work that they do is with looking at prints and looking at scat, and using remote trail cameras. So they do a lot of that kind of stuff, unless they're actually trying to get a collar on a wolf, in which case they really have to be, they have to get the wolf in their clutches. At that point, they try not to bother them too much. So they count the prints. They look at one thing that I was doing with this guy last week is he wanted to know whether a certain wolf had found a mate or not. So we were using his collar data to find where he'd been, and looking at his tracks, and then we were able to find a smaller pair of wolf tracks with him that was probably a female. So that was strong evidence that he paired up. And then they have a really regular life cycle timing. They always mate in January, and they always have their pups in March. And the pups always come out of the den, and I forget if it's April or May. So they know exactly when to show up and start to look to count how many pups they have. So it's they use a lot of trail cams too for that kind of stuff. I mean, it's still very, if you go to Yellowstone, you can almost be guaranteed to see a wolf if you sort of sign up to go on one of those wolf watching packages. But in Oregon, it's very difficult to actually see a wolf, even if you're hanging out with wolf biologists who know where they all are. So.
What has been your favorite, I guess you would call it project?
Well, I've been kind of obsessed with this wolf stuff for a couple of years now. After I wrote my book in 2011, which was all about sort of plant, it was about sort of new ways to think about ecology, but a lot of it was plant stuff. So then after I finished that, I kind of switched over and got into animals for a while. But I have a lot of different, a journalist, a writer has to have a lot of different projects all on the go. And so I'm writing about a bunch of other stuff too. I've been following sort of tropical forests ever since I went down to Peru. And I've been just writing a piece for the journal Nature this week about how scientists are responding to the Trump election. So that was really interesting. Interviewed a lot of scientists who have written strongly worded letters to him. I'm sure you probably won't read any of them, but and so that'll come out next week probably. Have a lot of different stuff going at different times. But the nice thing about being a freelancer is I'm really very free to follow what I'm interested in. As long as to be a struggle. But other than that, another thing I've been writing about a lot recently is using the new CRISPR gene editing techniques for conservation purposes. So there's a lot of cool possible applications for some of that technology that people are talking about, but it's very early days still. So one thing that's tricky is, how do I write a story about just a bunch of people talking about maybe doing a thing? It's not as exciting for the readers as if they were actually doing that thing. So that's what I'm still trying to work on. I'm still trying to craft a pitch that will allow me to write about this, even though it's really very still early.
Do you have a favorite publication that you write for?
Well, a lot, sort of. I mean, so most publications pay by the word, and the magazine that pays more than anybody else is National Geographic. They pay $5.50 a word, which is like 3 times what most other places pay. So from that purely monetary perspective, they are definitely my favorite publication. But I also like writing for them because a lot of the other publications that I write for have a sort of self-selected audience. So I write for Nature, that's scientists, generally speaking, grad students, that kind of thing. I write for sort of environmental magazines like Orion, and those people are all already environmentalists. But if you write for National Geographic, you're writing to sort of everybody in America. And so you have a real opportunity to influence the way they think about things. And you're not sort of already preaching to the choir. You've got a kind of a broad audience there. So I really like it from that perspective too. I've written a couple of op-eds for the New York Times, and there you almost don't even have as broad an audience with the New York Times because it tends to be a more sort of left-leaning, educated group that reads that paper. You know, National Geographic is in like every dentist office in the country. So.
Have you ever been in danger doing what you do?
In danger? Yeah, a little bit. When I was down in Peru, there were 2 moments that were very scary. One was when I was out monkey hunting with these guys who live inside this national park there. That's their main game that they're interested in taking, is monkeys, and they hunt them with bows and arrows, which is very difficult. We didn't actually catch any monkeys that day. But at a certain point, all the monkeys around us started screaming in this very kind of different way, and the guys I was with were like, "Oh, that's their jaguar alarm call." I mean, their jaguar alarm call. There's a jaguar right here, and we couldn't see it because we were in a very dense jungle. But I definitely felt to have a large predatory cat somewhere, you know, right next to us. That was scary. And then I wrote about that for the piece because the piece talks about hunting and whether it's sustainable down there. Well, on the way back out of the park, this was a place that you had to get to by motorized canoe, and it took 3 or 4 days to get there. So we had to sort of sleep on the beaches in tents on the way back. Just kind of whenever it got dark, we'd pull over the canoes and set up camp. And one night we were sleeping on the beach of this river, and there was an amazingly intense thunder, lightning, rainstorm, and my tent like blew over. I had to like hold the inside of my tent the whole night, and I was sure we were all going to be drowned because these are very broad, shallow rivers, and so when you dump that much rain into them, they can rise very quickly. So people wake up swept downriver, 50 miles. So that was nerve-wracking. The wolf stuff is not dangerous, really, because wolves are really pretty terrified of humans. So if you come around a corner and run into a pack of wolves, they might yell at you, they might bark and howl because they're trying to scare you off, but they're almost certainly not going to go for your throat. So I feel pretty calm when I'm out with the wolf guys. Probably the most dangerous thing I do is driving to my field sites, driving them around. If you do statistical analysis of all the different things you do in your life, driving around is usually the most dangerous.
What is CRISPR gene editing?
Oh, so that's you should look it up. It's really fascinating stuff. So it's kind of like next generation genetic engineering. In the sort of old days, if they wanted to add a gene to a something, kind of just shot it randomly at the gene at the chromosomes and hoped that it ended up somewhere in the right place. But what CRISPR does is it uses a little system that evolved in bacteria to get rid of viruses, to put the gene exactly where you want it. It's just like cut and paste on your computer. You can just pop it in right exactly where you want it. And what it's done is it's made genetic engineering very accurate and very cheap. And instead of having to do a bazillion rounds and hoping to get the effect that you want, you can just kind of do it pop. It's like Legos. And one of the things that comes with it, or that's been sort of coupled with it in the popular imagination, is this notion of gene drives. And the way that gene drives work is that you insert into the genome not only the gene that you want to see expressed, like a gene to make the fruit fly green or something, but you also insert the whole CRISPR system into the fly's genome so that when it reproduces, that editing will take place in every single one of its offspring. Which means that you can push a trait through the entire population, an entire species really, in just a few generations. Because even if being green makes them less fit or more likely to die, this technique will ensure that 100% of their offspring have that gene. Incredibly powerful for doing something like, getting rid of malaria or other mosquito-borne illnesses. But at the same time, it could be very difficult to put back in the bottle once you unleash it. So there was actually just an open letter released a couple of days ago by several hundred scientists sort of pleading with the international regulatory bodies not to ban research on gene drives, which they have been talking about doing because people are so worried about them.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for joining us this morning. This has been really, really cool.
Yeah, it's a cozy snow day here, so it's nice to see you guys and it's sort of virtually get out of the house.
Thank you so much. It was nice talking to you. Yay, very, very cool. And I will say, it was cool. So one of the things that happened when we were in Banff this summer when she was giving her talk, there were 2 other TED Talks that were on CRISPR. They're fantastic talks. I didn't know anything about it prior to going this summer. It's awesome and kind of scary too, because then what's the implication? If you can change the genes in a fruit fly, what else can you change the genes in, right? Where's the end? And that's part of it. So one of the talks was about how you can change the genes, and essentially like you would be able to catalog order a baby based on what hair color you want, what eye color you want, because all of that can be done with CRISPR. Isn't that crazy? So the talks, if you're interested at all in that kind of like genetic modification sort of stuff, the 2 talks that are up right now on TED are fantastic. They're scary, but they're fantastic. Well, very, very cool. Did everyone get a chance, if you hadn't signed in with Miss P, so I can get you signed in for the agility app? Does anyone else need?
Well, I signed in.
Okay, fantastic. I'll make sure that I've got everybody in here to do that.
No, you guys are good.
I was going to say, awesome!
So thank you so much. Hey, Miss Peace Class, what do you say to Mrs. Ward?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay. No, thank you guys.
All right, so Miss Peace Class, we are going to head back to my classroom. Thank you for having us as guests.
Anytime.
Thank you so much.
Oh, watching 6 hour 2.
It's so creepy, but